everyone. Welcome to our first ever Wizards.exe Alumni Roundtable, presented by FTC Team 9794 Wizards.exe. In the past, we've had many of our Wizards.exe alumni go to college. They brought the lessons they learned in FTC with them, and today we're going to be hearing what they learned through FTC and how that's affected their experience as they've gone to college. My name is Isha Sharma, and I'll be your host for this session. Please use the chats for any questions related to the presentation, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Today, we're honored to have our Wizards alumni here with us, Sartok Bhatnagar, Lena Franklin, Anika Seth, and Ayush Vyas speak about how FTC has helped them navigate their college experiences. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. So right off the bat, can we have everybody introduce themselves?
Of course. So hey y'all, my name is Annika. I am a first-year student at Yale University. I graduated from the first programs as a student in 2021, and I'm now returning to first as both a mentor and as a member of the First at Yale Alumni chapter at my school. At Yale, I hold a number of different positions. I work for the school newspaper at Yale called the Yale Daily News. I also have a research role at the Yale School of Medicine, and I'm part of an effort to improve campus culture through the Yale University Office of Gender and Campus Culture.
I'm Lena. I just graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in physics, and I will be starting to work full-time for the Naval Research Lab before eventually going to grad school. At the University of Maryland, I've done a lot of research in high-energy particle physics, and I've also been involved with a lot of on-campus makerspaces, which was definitely inspired by my first experience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ayush. I am a current freshman at Indiana University Kelley School of Business, where I am studying finance. I participated in FIRST for the past 4 years, and like Annika, I also graduated in 2021. And around campus at Indiana University, some of the clubs I'm involved in are Chapter 11 Solutions, as well as the Financial Services Club.
Hey everyone, I'm Sartok. I'm a sophomore at UC Berkeley studying electrical engineering and computer science. I was on Wizards for 5 years, and then since the 2 years I've graduated, I've been mentoring them as well as other area local teams and also volunteering in the area. I'm part of the Air Force ROTC program at Berkeley, and I also do some research related to quadruped robots at the Hybrid Robotics Lab. And I've also continued to volunteer with First Stuff in California. I'm also part of a club that's similar to First, but they run a robotics competition for some Bay Area high schools.
Okay, so all of your experiences sound really interesting. So did First inspire you to do the major you're in right now, or was it another interest? Like I know Anika, you're double majoring in biomedicine and gender studies. So how has First or other interests in your life inspired you to work on those things?
That's a really great question. And I think for me, so I'm studying biomedical engineering as my primary major. And that was a very much, I think, a first informed decision where I really enjoy being around technical research, technical work. And I think pursuing engineering was a really big part of my first experience. But then I think on the complementary side of that, I also did a lot of work in political advocacy and in journalism and English and that kind of stuff through high school and middle school. And I think for me, I knew that I kind of had to find a way that I could do both and pursue both intersectionally. And that's kind of why I ended up choosing to do a double major, both in the hardcore engineering and STEM side, but then also trying to diversify that with a more social science, humanities-based approach through my gender major. For me, long-term, I want to try and marry these two fields to pursue some kind of joint career in health policy and reproductive technology, contraceptives, that kind of stuff. And I think First being a very intersectional activity where it's not just the robots, it's also the non-technical work, the outreach, the marketing, and everything that goes with, your technical work on a team. I think that was a really big part of me seeing that, yeah, it is actually possible to not just do one or the other, but to really be able to do both and do both well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like I said, I studied physics, and that interest definitely arose long before I started doing First. But through First, I learned a lot of the skills that were sort of fundamental in being successful in my physics major. skills like communicating technical ideas, computation. I do a lot of computational work through my physics. And so while my interest in physics wasn't inspired by FIRST, it's definitely helped me as I pursue that path.
So for me, it was actually a little different. Couple years back, I really wanted to go into the engineering field, but after learning how to truly invest, I decided that my passion lied more in the finance sector. But there were still things that I learned through FIRST that have kind of helped me in the major I pursue today. So a lot of stuff in the finance field is related around coming up with models, making presentations through PowerPoint. And so my senior year, when I took on the corporate lead role, a lot of that included reaching out to mentors as well as coming up with like sponsorship packets and stuff like that. So I'd say a lot of that has still helped me with the major I'm pursuing right now.
Yeah, and for me, before I was in FIRST, I kind of knew I wanted to go on the engineering route, but doing FTC those 5 years kind of helped clarify like what specific disciplines I was interested in. And I've seen that kind of translate to work I've done through internships or kind of like the research I mentioned earlier. This kind of stuff I've been getting involved with campus. So it's helped kind of solidify some interests and passions and then also help pave a specific direction forward.
All right. So what projects are you guys currently working on in college or otherwise?
Great question as well. So I'm doing a bunch of stuff both on campus and off of campus. And I think the things that I'm most excited about right now, I'm doing a lot of work in politics, both in the Connecticut State House, but then also working for a couple of national congressional or like district-based congressional campaigns for national offices. And that's been really fun. And I think that that ties pretty closely to what I did on my first teams, where I was doing a lot of outreach. And I think being able to learn how to do things like write emails, ask for money, talk to people, figure out what people really care about, what makes them tick, are things that I use every day on campaigns. And that's been a really cool way where I've been able to connect my first experience to a really, non-conventional like path after FIRST. So that's been a thing that I'm really happy to be involved in now. I'm also working next semester on a project that I'm super stoked for, where we're trying to build some kind of automated device to make it easier for doctors and nurses to handle code blue situations, which are cardiac arrests, in a medical context. And this project follows, I think, a pretty conventional FIRST engineering process where you're thinking about, okay, what are my requirements? What can I brainstorm here? How can I iterate and test and improve on various prototypes to build a final product? And even though it's a very different application from what I would say a lot of FIRST projects are, I think it does follow a pretty similar pathway. And being able to, I think, understand the engineering design process is of great, great help here. Whereas like a first year student, I really wouldn't be able to get that kind of research position without having some kind of exposure or background in software and hardware, which I think FIRST really equipped me for.
So this is a transitional period in my life. I just graduated and I'm about to enter the workforce full time. But some of the things that I were involved in, especially before I graduated, was high energy physics research. So working on designing detectors and simulating detectors that are used in high energy colliders, like at the LHC. I've also been doing more engineering focused works through internships at the Naval Research Lab. So working on GPS systems and various signal processing projects. And a couple other things that really drew inspiration from FIRST were my work with on-campus makerspaces, both as a manager and then also as leadership on-campus makerspaces, where I helped teach others how to use some of the tools that I first learned how to use in FIRST. And also in that vein, I really enjoyed the mentorship aspects of FIRST. So I've been participating as a mentor for younger undergraduate physics students.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, one of the clubs that I participated in was the Financial Services Club. So a lot of what I did for the previous semester was kind of competing in some of the case competitions revolving around that club, which not only taught me how to present really well, but also how to make different evaluation models like LBOs, discounted cash flows, and comparable company analysis. And in this coming semester, I'm going to be in the finance diversity program, where I'm going to be able to hear from different people who are in the industry, as well as be able to, give presentations in that course as well.
So one of the projects I'm working on, which I think relates pretty strongly to what you guys are doing at FTC, is we're working with these. They're called quadruped robots. They basically look like dogs, and we're trying to get them to be able to navigate what looks like stable terrain, but is actually in reality unstable. So you can think about one of these robots going in after a natural disaster or like a wildfire or something, and then trying to do whatever search and rescue work. And we're figuring out the best way to use different sensors together to prevent the robot from disabling itself, basically by going over a wrong path, which initial sensor readings like vision may say is a stable, navigationable path. So you can think about it, how that relates to what you guys do in autonomous for your game. And then some of the other projects I've been working on, I intern at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. And for the last year, I've been working on the COVID data dashboard. So all the data that's getting pushed out to Johns Hopkins University and the CDC. The team I'm working on is putting together those data products and making sure as the pandemic evolves, different aspects of demographic data and all that type of stuff is being collected and pushed out as soon as possible.
Awesome. So it sounds like you guys are working on a lot. So with your projects, with college, with everything going on, it obviously takes some time management skills, productivity skills, skills that you need to actually begin work on stuff and to actually stay focused. So how have your time management and work skills changed since your high school years?
Honestly, I think they haven't changed that much for me. And I think as a lot of people on this Zoom can attest to, I live by my color-coded Google Calendar. And that really has been super helpful to me through high school, through FTC, through college, and through I think most of what I've been doing. And for me, it's really about how can I maximize all the time that I'm spending. And I think another big part of it has been, I think I really genuinely enjoy all the things that I'm putting my time toward. And I think if I'm really deriving joy from all these things, it doesn't really feel like an overwhelming obligation. It feels like a thing I'm doing because I want to, because it really is a thing that I'm doing because I want to. And that makes it a lot easier, at least for me, to try and balance my time because I really care about all these things that I'm putting my mind to. And if I care about them, I'm more inclined to do them, but also to do them well. And doing them well requires that I put time into them.
Yeah, similarly, I already had a strong time management skills in high school. But one of the benefits of having participated in a more disciplined program like FIRST is that once I entered college, I really felt prepared to handle everything that was coming my way. And I didn't get stressed about things that some of my peers felt difficult time management wise.
I'd say my time management has actually changed drastically from high school. I feel like being on my own now, I'm kind of responsible for everything that I need to be doing. So whether that's, planning out my schedule for that week or making sure that all my assignments are due for the day. I'd say like from high school transitioning into college, a lot of that has been more mapped out for me because of those short 16 to 17 weeks I have in a semester.
I'd like to reiterate kind of what Annika said. When you're working on things that you really enjoy, it becomes easy to kind of fit into your schedule or kind of dedicate your time towards that. And then another thing I think that kind of first helped me with was, and this really applies to college life as well, kind of keeping your like set of tasks or things you have to do for classes in both a short-term and a long-term picture. So what do you have to get done today or during the week versus, especially for projects, what has to happen over the next month or so. And you do that with your FTC season in the beginning and kind of work towards different checkpoints during the season versus, what has to be done in the weekend. So I think that's something that translates really well.
Okay, so what other activities do you do outside of FTC?
Super fun question. So in high school, I did a lot of work with our school newspaper at my high school. So I ran that for a year, and that's kind of how I ended up getting into journalism in college as well. I also was involved with my high school's debate team, and that was a really large time suck for me too. Traveling across the country for debate tournaments is no small time commitment. And then in addition to like robotics and mentoring robotics teams and then those other two activities, I thought it was really important to have at least some stuff in my life that I was doing, not in like a competitive way, but in a very like soul fulfilling way, I guess, if you will. And for me, that was music for most of high school and middle school. So I played the piano for a long time, competitively sometimes, but it ended up really being more of like a cathartic release kind of activity. And I think that that's really important to have in your life.
Yeah. So in high school, first was definitely my primary activity in terms of time commitment. But I was also the president of a couple different school clubs, like the French Honor Society and the Puzzle Club. And in addition, just like Annika, I felt it very important to have hobbies that were something I did primarily for fun. So I'm a really big gardener, and that takes up a lot of my time.
So outside of first, some of the things that I participated in inside of school were the cybersecurity club, Wooten tutoring, as well as ski club, which was just one of my other hobbies. And then aside from that, I also took up music production, as that was something that I felt was pretty fun to learn.
So FTC was kind of, I dedicated most of my time to that, but the other kind of activities I was involved in, I played a lot of sports. So I spent a lot of time playing baseball, basketball, ultimate frisbee as well. So that kind of, even though all those things are also in the competitive arena, it was all three of those things are good, like a stress releaser, kind of a way to step back from stress from school or first.
So, in that same vein, did first help you get involved with other activities, or even see or explore new experiences, or just get you exposed to something new?
That's an interesting question. I think I wouldn't say that first necessarily helped me do other activities because I think first was a huge time commitment in and of itself, and that like I often felt like I was trading off doing first with other stuff, and I feel like it almost worked the other way in terms of just logistics. But I will say, in terms of skill set, I think first was really helpful in terms of how I succeeded in other activities. So, in debate, for example, I think I never found public speaking particularly challenging because through first, through outreach, through judging, and things like that, I was already pretty comfortable speaking to strangers. And I think that was really helpful to me in like a debate context. I also did research at bio labs, but also at like engineering places through high school. And I'm doing that now as well. And I think, like I was saying before, the exposure I received through first was really like helpful and conducive to my success in those spaces too. So I think it was kind of a double-edged sword sometimes where I wanted to be this really like successful in first. And I think that drive often made it harder to like put enough time to other things, especially when I cared so much about my teams doing well. But I think I was really only able to do well in other things because of what I learned from first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so definitely once I moved on from doing first in high school and I had this extra time in college, while first didn't really lead directly to any roles or positions, the skills I learned were 100% helpful in terms of performing research, getting internships, taking on leadership roles at various clubs at universities. And another opportunity that I just want to highlight that FIRST provides is there are some scholarships that are out there that are awarded specifically to FIRST graduates. So keep an eye out for those if you're looking.
So I'd say first is definitely, kind of impacted the experience that I decided to take on in college. So I'm actually minoring in computer science. And I'd say because of the experience that I've had with learning how to program through FTC, it's kind of helped me in the minor that I'm taking right now, but it's also inspired me to take on that minor as well.
Kind of similar to what's been said, I think FTC was more, it helped me like get better at the other things I was doing, opposed to getting involved with them in the first place. A lot of the soft skills that you get through your first experience kind of directly translate to a lot of things in the real world, and it kind of makes it easy to take initiative, get more involved, and your different interests, which before I was in FTC was a little bit of a problem for me, but through my first experience, I was able to kind of get better at that.
So, are you still involved with FIRST or even FTC? And if you're not involved with FIRST, are you still involved in like other STEM programs or robotics and things like that?
So yeah, I am still involved in FIRST. I'm an alumni ambassador like Sartok is for FIRST Chesapeake. So I do that remotely from Connecticut. I like Zoom into stuff down here. And I'm also part of, like I was saying before, the alumni chapter for FIRST students at Yale. So we do like volunteering stuff throughout like the New York City area and other like locally close FIRST events that are near us in Connecticut. And then I'm also mentoring a couple of teams, like FLL teams in Connecticut, but also FLL junior teams, or I guess FLL Explorer teams is what they're called now, in the Maryland area. So I am still involved as much as I can be. And I think a lot of that is facilitated by things being virtual now. Not that that's like a good thing, but it is somewhat easier, I think, as an out of state Chesapeake alumni to be able to engage with the Chesapeake FIRST community because a lot of things are being held over Zoom or over other web streaming services right now.
Yeah, kind of conversely, I found that the virtual aspect has made it very harder for me to stay connected. I have not been involved with FIRST in the past couple years, and a lot of that is just due to the pandemic, because I enjoyed, going to competitions and being a volunteer and being a judge. And once that aspect was sort of taken out of it, or like going to talk one-on-one with team members, once that aspect was sort of removed from it, it became less enjoyable and less attractive for me to be involved. But hopefully, as things open up again, I will get back involved with FIRST.
So unfortunately, I haven't been involved as much as I wish I could be because of that transitionary period from high school to college. I kind of just wanted to focus on getting settled, but I'm hoping in the coming months that I can help mentor or at least volunteer at some of the events.
So I've been pretty active since I graduated. I think definitely one of the things about going virtual was I was able to mentor Wizards and a couple other teams virtually from out in California, which was really nice to kind of stay involved with the team. And then this year, outside of the mentoring, I'm also really excited to get back to volunteering at in-person competitions. I'm going to be at 3 of the next 4 in Chesapeake, so maybe I'll see some of you guys. But it's been really great to get back to these in-person competitions and really feel part of the FIRST community again, like how it used to be.
Yeah, it's really exciting as, FIRST is moving back to in person, though with Omicron, things are getting a little bit on the iffy side. But this is a super similar question, but how difficult is it to be involved in FIRST, even though your college is out of state? I know you guys have said, like, with the virtual option, things are certainly getting easier. But I know that Lena said that the virtual option also means that some of the more fun things, like being in person and seeing robots, that's definitely a trade-off. So how do you guys feel about, being involved in FIRST, even though you're not in the FIRST Chesapeake region, or if your college is out of state?
That's a really good question. And I think the bulk of what I've been doing with FIRST right now has either been virtually as an alumni ambassador for Chesapeake or like virtually as well, but in the Connecticut area. So I think I really haven't been doing a lot of work as extensively as Sartok has been, for example, with teams in this area. So I haven't really had that big of an issue, I guess, with things being virtual because the work that I'm doing is either already virtual or it's in my local area either way. But I do think in general, like I probably would have been more involved with things in like the DMV area had things not been virtual. So there is that.
I am local, so this question doesn't really apply to me, so I'll pass it on to you.
Yes, so while I haven't really been involved in FIRST for the past couple of months, I still think that with everything being online, I think being able to connect back with FIRST might not be as difficult.
I think, being out of state, one of the easier things is I can still I go to do things like this roundtable or kind of like Wizards, they host design reviews. I go to those. So those are being out of state doesn't really affect things like that. But I really enjoy volunteering in person. So being out of state can make that difficult just a little bit, just because you don't necessarily know the region you're going to be volunteering in, or as a college student, transportation is really hard. So I haven't been able to volunteer in California as much as I would have liked to. But like during winter break, I'm able to get back to volunteering. So there's multiple sides to it, depending on what kind of opportunities you're looking for in terms of getting involved.
Mm-hmm. So, what advice would you give to your younger self now that you're in college? And yeah, you're in college, you're grown up, you're having some new information and new classes.
I think the first caveat here is that I've been in college for like 3 months. So I'm not really sure how qualified I am to give advice to like my 4 months ago self. I feel like she kind of knew the same things that I know now. But I guess I would try to encourage my like younger self to maybe be a little bit more intentional about diversifying my interests. I think I kind of found that I was good at the non-technical work, like outreach and documentation, and I kind of let myself think that that's all I really had to do or that's all that I could do. And there is kind of a time trade-off here where it's like you can only have so much time that you put into any one activity. And for me, I kind of made most of that time the non-technical work that I was good at, that was, good for the team and everything too. But I really wish that I'd urged myself to make myself be less comfortable in these spaces and do more technical work, because I do think that the exposure itself has been really useful and I'm really grateful for it because it helps me every day in like my technical projects at school and out of school. But I think that had I done more hands-on work while I was a first student specifically, I would have been even more well placed to succeed in engineering classes and in engineering projects, curricularly and extracurricularly.
Yeah, I guess my advice to my younger self would just be to be less stressed and less concerned about things. One of the things I was concerned about initially going to the University of Maryland was, prestige. But in the end, I'm glad I did, for mostly for financial reasons. Um, uh, Everything turned out all right. I found a lot of great mentors. I've done a lot of great research. I've had a lot of great opportunities. And I know everything's going to be okay. Like we've seen with COVID, you're never going to be able to control everything. So I would have just, now I have more confidence in myself that, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through it. It'll be fine.
I tell my younger self to explore new interests and take advantage of every opportunity. I think it's really important to kind of explore new things. Like I really thought that engineering was a thing for me and that's what I should do in college. But after learning how to invest and just learning about like the different markets and stuff, I kind of figured out that engineering maybe wasn't the right thing for me. So honestly, just exploring your interests.
I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I would say is don't be afraid to take initiative. That's something that's been hammered into me in my college experience. But for one thing, it's one of the best ways you're going to learn. And first, you're going to get more involved. And a byproduct of that is you're going to get involved with the things that you actually enjoy. So not being afraid to take on leadership roles or just get more involved. That's really how you're going to get the most out of your experience and kind of clarify what you may want to do in the future or what your other interests might be.
Before we move on, I actually just want to really quickly like emphasize and add to what Lena was saying about not being so stressed. I like that's super true, Lena. And I think that like for me, while I was in first, I definitely had my moments where I was super overwhelmed, very anxious, had breakdowns. I think everyone here probably witnessed one of my breakdowns at some point over the course of our time on Wizards. And I think a lot of things I let get super overblown in my head and just get really pressed and stressed about a lot of things that just don't really matter long term. And I think if I had just let myself be a little bit less concerned with winning and with accolades and with, reputation of our team and that kind of stuff, I would have been a lot happier and had a lot more fun during first. Don't get me wrong, I had a great time in first overall. That's why I did it for so long. But I think I really would have been in a better place mentally had I not been so stressed out. And I think I would have been able to like stop and smell the roses and really appreciate what I was around and all the really talented people that I was able to work with and meet during my time in first, had I not been so concerned with like, oh, are we not doing enough right now, if that makes sense.
Yep, totally agree. I really love the advice of, just chill out. If you don't just don't stress out. Everything is gonna, come together eventually, and to just work it out, just chill. I think that's some really good advice that I think everybody, no matter what age, could learn. So, this is sort of in this same vein, but what is your advice to new people in FTC who are joining?
Probably similarly, I think the first one that I would say is like try things that you don't think you're going to be good at because you never know what's going to stick. And I think it often doesn't even matter if you're good at something. I think if you like it and it is fun for you and you want to put time into it, you can really become good at whatever you want to become good at. And I think for me, I often thought that what I came into the team being good at was all that I could do on any given team. And I feel like that's not true. I think it just takes drive and desire to excel at something. And I didn't really realize that early on in my first experience. And I kind of wish I had. And then I think the other element would be like I was saying before, and like Lena started off with, to just be less stressed about things that are kind of superficial and don't really matter that much. Like, how many medals you take home at the end of a season, and think more about the memories you're making and the things you're learning.
Yeah, similarly, my advice would be to really think about what you want to get out of first and to act intentionally to get that. Because there's so many different things you can explore. You can explore technical aspects, outreach, mentorship, corporate outreach. So I would say think about what you want to get out of first and then make sure that that happens. And also similarly, make sure that you're finding a team that's a good fit for you in terms of competitiveness, in terms of the roles that are available, and in terms of the overall team goals.
I'd say try and experience every role on the team because you never really know what might be the right fit for you, whether that's mechanical software or even like the corporate side. Like my first year, I really just focused on the mechanical side, but my second year, I also worked on the software side, and that was really fun for me. So I'd say just try and experience every role.
I think what Lena said was very important, making sure you're part of a team that kind of fits your own goals, because that's kind of how you're going to get the most out of your experience. And then I guess I would also add that it's important to remember that FTC is it's not just a competition, it's really a learning experience. And, you're only going to get the most out of that if you are in an environment that can, support your own goals and allows you the flexibility to try and explore what you want to do. And it ties back to what I said before about taking initiative, but you shouldn't be afraid to try things that you don't have experience in or get involved with, whatever you want to.
Mhm. So, from that, what are you most proud of from your FTC or just learning robotics and STEM experience?
This is a really interesting question. What am I most proud of? Um, I think that the thing that I'm probably most proud of myself for doing is I joined first in seventh grade when I had absolutely no taste for STEM or robots or Legos or any of that sort of stuff. And I think I'm really proud of myself for not quitting STEM and robotics when I really wanted to, when I thought it wasn't for me. And and this I think is probably more credit to my parents than it really is to me for not letting me quit so early. But I'm really grateful to them and to myself for not giving up on what would I think eventually become a pretty large skill of mine. So I think it would be to my very, very young self for sticking with it despite really not wanting to.
Yeah, my biggest achievements in STEM definitely at this point are graduating with a degree in physics and also getting published.
So I'd say the thing I'm most proud of through first was my junior year when I took on the team captain role of Team New.exe. I just really was proud that I was able to actually lead a team to the state level. And honestly, there were a lot of moments where we went through hardships and different challenges, but sticking through it and leading a completely new team of rookie members was something I'm really proud of.
I think one of the things I'm most proud of is kind of the community that I've been a part in, the amazing people I've been able to meet and work with. So one side of that is kind of all the different like training things or outreach things I did. One of the cool moments I had on Berkeley when I first moved in was someone in my dorm recognized me from one of the videos I had made for one of the training videos that we had published on YouTube. But that kind of underscores, some of the things you can do, whether it's just your teammates or in your local community, the impact you can have on some people's lives. And then the second side, I would say, is, you get to meet a lot of people in first, and I've made some of my best friends in the first community. And I think that's, something that you carry with you throughout, into college and afterwards.
So, what is an important skill that FTC has helped develop?
This one might sound super like small and not important, but I think the biggest and most important skill that I learned from FTC is how to write an email. And I think that this sounds like super juvenile when I say it to other people when I talk about my first experience. But like a lot of my friends at school struggle writing emails to professors or to counselors or to advisors because it can be really stressful to be reaching out to someone in a very like high authority position who has like a very, lofty title and seems pretty daunting to reach out to. But I think for me, like from my FCC experience of like low-key LinkedIn stalking people and then asking them for money 2 hours later, I kind of got over that like fear of that large title and kind of grew like an ability to reach out to very arbitrary and very high ranking individuals. And that's been really helpful for me like in college and post first in asking for internships and not being afraid to be like, hey, my name is Annika. I'm a student at this school. I'm studying these things. Can I have a job in, better language, but just like kind of not having like that fear of writing the email in the first place. And then being able to go ahead and write that succinct and effective email thereafter, as I think a skill that a lot of people don't have and need.
Yeah, the most important skills I learned were also soft skills. If I had to pick the most important one, it would be communication and presentation skills. Through first, I became so much more comfortable talking with people, talking in front of people. And I also developed skills that I needed to communicate specifically technical ideas, which has really helped me going into a field where I have to talk about these technical ideas with people.
So I'd have to agree with Lena on this one, with the communication as well as presentation skills. I feel like a lot of the stuff I'm doing right now with the case competitions, or even one of the classes I took was business presentations, where it was basically all just presenting throughout the semester. Kind of coming in with that knowledge has given me an edge over other students, and kind of going to these different club fairs as well as networking events has helped me talk to older students as well as professionals in the industry.
Like Lena said, I think the soft skills were some of the things that were like some of the most important skills I developed that kind of translate to college and your career. For me, it was project management. I know in my current internship on my current project, I had to lead a couple new development features for the COVID dashboard, and being able to work with a small team and roll them out on time and on budget was, something that I was pretty comfortable with just because of my first experience. And another thing that I thought was really important, teams won't like this, but, learning to document everything and not doing it just at the last second. In a career and research environment, that's super important, for your success and just in terms of efficiency. So I think those were kind of like the two biggest things I took out of.
Mm-hmm. So, in that very similar vein, how did FTC on the whole prepare you for your job, and not even a job, but like projects you do, presentations, classes, just your day-to-day life as a college student, or in Lena's case, a grad student?
I think first in general prepared me pretty well for like life post high school. And I think a really big way it did so was like we were talking about earlier, time management, yes, but also budget management, where I think like money can be really hard to like think about and interact with sometimes, especially if you haven't like had to deal with like an itemized budget or like think about expenses and stuff like that before. And I think for me, like my biggest exposure to that previously had been being able to balance budgets and whatnot and like raise money and all that kind of stuff for my first teams. And then I think being able to translate that into like managing my own personal expenses and thinking about how much am I spending on like food this week and stuff like that, has been a really helpful skill to be able to take with me into like life and everything that's going to come through and post college. And then I think the other really big skill is just being able to interface with people, lead projects, things like that are pretty ubiquitous no matter what field of study you're pursuing.
Yeah, there are sort of two types of skills that I've learned that have really helped me. The first being the soft skills. So writing papers, giving presentations, talking about communicating things to my peers, both during projects and also while as I was doing research. And then the other thing that was really helpful for me in first, even though I'm doing physics, which is not something that is necessarily as prevalent in first when compared to things like computer science and engineering, a lot of the work that you do in physics is computation based, is design based. We're designing experiments, we're simulating, we're writing code to analyze data. So I also was able to learn to use those skills from first in my research and in my job.
So a lot of college is collaborating with other people and working in groups, and being able to have worked with different people throughout my first experience has kind of helped me with being able to work in a group in college. It's kind of helped me with managing conflict as well as helping our group kind of cooperate.
Echoing what I just said, being a good teammate or a team member goes a long way, whether it's, a group project in school or a specific task you have to work on at your job. I think that's something FTC really contributed towards for me, meshing all those soft skills together to create an effective product or operate as an efficient team. And then also, I think this is a more obvious thing, but FTC kind of gives you a lot of the entry-level skills you need to enter a job. And then those soft skills that we've all been talking about really help you kind of add a little bit more depth to your experience, really kind of grow in your position and kind of allow you to move on a path, like a productive path forward.
All right. So, what's the biggest difference from being in FTC and being in high school and being in college?
This one's interesting. I'm going to talk about high school to college first, and then maybe I'll have something to say about FTC to college. But I think the biggest difference in terms of like being at high school to being in college for me was no longer living with my family, which sounds pretty obvious, but I feel like it was the small things like doing my laundry, dealing with my own meals, my own sleep schedule, no one being like, hey, do your homework now. Just like the independence I think that college affords was a lot more different than I expected it to be. And I think that being able to manage my time in that regard was a thing that I wasn't really expecting, but it's a really important skill that I had to like be able to amplify my existing time management skills to accommodate. Then I think from FTC to like some of the projects that I'm doing now, I mean, first of all, I'm doing a lot more like non-tech related stuff in general, and that's just a pretty big change thematically. But then I think even in like the STEM spaces where I'm working, I think a lot of the goals are less defined, where I think in FTC, like, that the goal is, okay, take this wiffle ball and put it in that hoop or do a pull up on this bar. And there are a ton of different ways to do that objective, but the objective itself is pretty cleanly outlined. Whereas in the case of like a medical device project, the objective is to solve some kind of medical issue or some kind of hospital functionality. And you don't really have the clear picture of what that's going to look like. It's a very abstract goal. And so I think engineering solutions for these more abstract goals is a very different, not very different, but like a slightly different like approach in general.
Yeah, when it comes to college coursework, especially, you do lose a lot of that collaborative aspect that you get in first. So that was a big change for me. But also, like Annika said, a lot of the challenges that you'll face when you're going into your job are going to require you to define the problems and define the outcomes that you want. I've had projects that I've gotten, no guidance on, and I've just had to decide what I want to get out of it, what I want this experiment to entail, what I want this device to do. So there's definitely a lot more freedom, but there's also a lot more challenges in terms of coming up with those requirements.
So repeating what Annika said about the independence, being in that transitioning period from high school to college, a lot of what the first semester has taught me is that I'm kind of responsible for everything that's going on. And so like in high school, I had my parents with me. A lot of stuff was taken care of by them. But now in college, a lot of that is taken care of by me, and I have to make sure that I'm doing everything by myself. And then in terms of like how first and college is kind of different, a way I like to look at it is like each year, you have a different objective in a game. So like first is always evolving, while in college is kind of more like everything that you're learning is transitioning over to your coming years, your next semester, stuff like that.
I'll speak on the kind of the scope of FTC in college. So this has been said already, but in FTC you have a very specific mission in terms of the robot game, and it's a little bit broader, but you also have specific goals and missions with your non-technical programs. And I think transitioning from that to college, the big difference there is college, it's super open-ended. You'll have projects where you have maybe a single requirement, but you have to have a lot of rigor in what you eventually develop. And I think being able to take advantage of all the resources you have in an open experience like college is a lot different than kind of what you're trying to do in FTC, where you're going from a very narrow scope to a much more wide angle lens in college, where you're trying to clarify what career you might want or what your interests in life are beyond academics.
Mm-hmm. So how did you use your FTC experiences on your college applications? And overall, what was your college application experience like?
This is a fun question for sure. That's sarcasm. But my college application process, like Ayush's, because we're in the same year, was like at the heat of the pandemic. So we had just been in isolation for like the first time, and so mine was a kind of very like lonely process overall, because I was kind of writing all of my essays alone in my bedroom, and that was really not fun. Um, but I think in terms of how I used FTC on my college applications, I tried to focus on any supplements that I wrote about first. Tried to focus on like the more like people-based aspects of first as opposed to the competitions. And my logic here was that any admissions officer can kind of see my first competitive experience and success and all of that from my resume or from my activity section. But I think the things that the essays are best suited for was sharing more about my personality and who I am. And I thought that those would be more reflected by an actual personal story than by some number or by some award name or something like that. But even beyond that, I tried to kind of stay away from writing about first in my actual essays, because I felt that the bulk of what my first skills were kind of already reflected both through like my other projects through high school, but also through like just the line item of like first XYZ award, XYZ like certificate or whatever on my resume already. And I wanted my essays to be more about like the niche things you wouldn't know about me. So like my favorite shows, the movies I watched, the books that really stuck with me, certain things like that I thought were a little bit more personable.
I'll be honest, I applied to college 4 years ago. I don't remember very much of what I did. But again, something I said before, I did get offered scholarships that were for being specifically in first. So keep an eye out for those. And it was a great thing to discuss on my college applications in general.
So I'd say my college application process went pretty smooth because of the pandemic, actually. Because a lot of stuff was kind of online, it gave me more time to focus on my college applications during that time. And then in terms of how first has kind of impacted my college application, my Common App essay, which is the essay that all colleges see, was actually written on the experience that I had in my junior year. And it was actually a specific moment in first. It was actually one of the qualifiers we had. And so I kind of just highlighted my experience through that and what I had learned from that as well.
I'm a little, I'm having a little trouble remembering exactly how I did this, but when I used first on my college applications, I think I tended to, you don't want to talk about the competition like Annika was saying. You want to kind of talk about specific experiences that, kind of reflect your personality or your leadership abilities or something to that effect. So you don't necessarily want to talk about the robot game or any, technical achievements you have. You may want to pick, some experiences that you've had teaching others or working with others in the first community. I think, those type of organizational or mentoring and teaching skills can be overlooked. And you want to remember, kind of try and encompass the things that make up your first experience wherever they are applicable in your college applications.
I kind of also want to add that I think everyone's college process like looks super different. Like some folks apply to like medical programs when they're in high school, and some folks apply to like specific vocational or tech or trade programs, and some folks apply to community or like go to community colleges, and some folks apply to like English programs or BSMS, like humanities things and whatnot. And I think a lot of how you may want to frame first in your application very much depends on what you're applying for and what your goals are post high school. So I think if your goals are like going to an engineering school or something like that, that's going to look very different from if your goal is to go to medical school or if your goal is to go to like an English program. And I feel like that's just like worth noting more generally that there is no like one formulaic way to convey first on your application. And I feel like it very much just varies based on who you are, what your experience was, and what you're wanting to do with that experience going forward.
It sounds like you guys had a different range of experiences on college apps. And I think that's really cool to see how you guys, reacted and how you guys thought about things based on the different experiences you have. So, just here's a fun question. What was your favorite FTC or robot game when you did FTC and why?
This is controversial. Mine was Velocity Vortex. I liked the cat ball. I thought it was really fun to watch the cat ball go on like the centerpiece structure like during Endgame. That was fun. Controversial, I know, and I'm sorry to everyone who hates Velocity Vortex, but I think you're wrong.
Yeah, I didn't have a strong favorite, but I guess I would lean also to Velocity Vortex. It was fun. It was funky. I liked it.
I'd say mine was Rover Ruckus. I just thought it was really cool to see all the cool designs that different teams are coming up with on how to pick up those minerals.
I think in retrospect, in terms of a game design aspect, I liked Rescue. Since that was our first year, it was not necessarily the most fun game I played. I think I enjoyed Velocity Vortex the most. I think for different reasons. I just enjoyed the open field and, kind of unlimited scoring aspect of it. But, there were a lot of great FTC games, so a lot to choose from.
Mhm. And in that similar vein, what makes an FTC game fun for you, or what are some of your favorite elements you've seen in FTC games? I know, like the capping ball velocity vortex is a super fun one to watch.
I think Sarthik is right that part of what made Velocity Vortex really fun to watch was the fact that there was no cap on the number of points you could get. I think in Relic Recovery, the game that came after, part of what made it like less enjoyable was that there was a score cap, and like at a certain level, you kind of just watch teams fill up the entire glyph box and then put the relics on the mat across the field, and then it would kind of just be over, and they would just wait for the time to run out. And I think that was kind of like, okay, great. Now what's going to happen, And I think that was part of it. But I think for me, like what made the games that I played in the most fun were the ones where I had strong memories. So I think for Velocity Vortex, one of my favorite FTC memories ever was we were in, the Wizards basement, building a cat ball mechanism to drop the cat ball on New Year's Eve, which like a couple years later sounds like the most nerdy and boring and awful thing that I could have said literally ever. Like I'm embarrassed to say it, but it was really fun in the moment to be like, with my teammates doing something that was FTC related on New Year's Eve and capping the cap ball instead of watching the Times Square ball drop on New Year's. So I think the memories are what for me makes a game the most memorable and the most fun.
I always enjoy when there's something, new that hasn't, hasn't been sort of, I mean, you pick things up, you shoot things. I like it when a game introduces something that hasn't been really done before. That's what makes it cool for me.
So yeah, the reason I think Rover Ruckus was really special to me, at least, was that was my first year with the Wizards, and being at the world competition, playing in the elimination matches. I just remember that feeling of it was just really cool actually being on the playing field during that time. So I guess that's kind of the reason why Rover Ruckus was at least special to me.
I think, like Lena said, having unique or like very different aspects of the game is something that makes it interesting. I'll say two things. The first is I think one of the most special seasons I had was my last one. Being on the drive team for the vast majority of my FTC season or experience, kind of like the feeling of doing everything you can to do the best in the robot competition, which is what our senior year was like. That it's a different feeling and different type of effort that you give. I think that's something that made that memorable. And on kind of the flip side, I'll take this question in a little bit of a different direction. But the game is really fun to watch when the teams around you are kind of learning from each other and making a better competition experience. I think if I can recommend something to FTC teams, which Wizards has done a lot of, but if you help the teams around you, like in your very local region or state region, your competitions will be more fun and you'll learn a lot more. And it turns out to be a better experience than just trying to beat other teams. You want to help each other out.
Mm-hmm. And not Lena, sorry, Anika and Sarthak already mentioned this a bit, but what was your favorite or a moment that sticks out for you when you were on Wizards?
I think my favorite moment ever on Wizards. So I did a lot of FLL junior work when I was in FCC specifically, and I used to like run the expos at the FLL state championship, and that was like the biggest FLL expo in the state. And I remember at the end of I think my second year running this expo, two of the teams that I mentored gave me their trophy instead of keeping it for themselves. And like I gave it back because what am I gonna do with the Lego trophy? I mean, seriously. But it was just really sweet that they thought to like give me what to them was like the biggest deal ever, like the token of all their hard work. And they gave me like this huge hug after, and they're like, I almost cried. I cry a lot at first tournaments if it's not like super obvious by now. But that was a really special moment where I felt like what I was doing really mattered to someone around me. And I think that that's a thing that I'm going to remember for a long, long time.
I had a lot of moments I enjoyed. Actually, I think this was just after I had graduated from Wizards. But there was one competition where I had just gone to volunteer and they didn't have enough judges, so I got made a judge with no preparation, and not feeling that I was qualified at all to do this. So that was fun. The sensation of winning awards, winning Inspire was always really fun. I had a lot of good memories.
So I'd say my favorite memory with the Wizards was it was the Rover Ruckus season, and I believe it was after states. The whole team and everyone in the team's family had gone out to a dinner, and it was just a fun bonding experience being with everyone. It was just really fun.
Kind of on a similar note, I think during the off season after Velocity Vortex, the team went on a road trip to Indiana to compete in the off-season competition. I think that experience, it was a pretty chill competition, and being on a road trip with my teammates was really fun. So I think that's one of my top memories, even though there are a lot.
And another memory that just came to me is a restaurant that we ate in when we went to Delaware Estates. It was so good. I don't remember what it was, but I remember loving it.
The Italian restaurant?
No, not that one.
Then which restaurant?
I don't remember what it was called.
Well, at least it sounds like you guys are eating good at qualifiers. So, we'll be getting some good food in like a couple weeks, which is good to know. So, question from the chat for Lena. What did you get published for? And congratulations on attending grad school. No, I'm sorry, but like you're going to grad school. So, congratulations.
Yeah, I published a paper on bit using something called rolling shutter in order for high frequency signal detection. And then I've also had some internal publications like inside CMS.
We got a couple more questions. So to the people who are new to college, how is transitioning to college and transitioning from back to in-person learning at the same time, like, transitioning from the pandemic into college? So how was that experience for you guys?
This is a good question because I think I'm still figuring out what that experience is like for me. I'm still very much getting used to the idea of being in person, which is great timing because my school is going to be online for at least 2 weeks when we get back from winter break. So I'm just very confused in general about how I learn best. But I think it was very hard, honestly, it's just like very hard to go from being online for second semester senior year, which, like, if we're all being very candid, most folks don't do very much work second semester senior year. And I was very much in that camp of not doing that much work second semester senior year for school. And then compounded with it being online, I was sleeping till noon every day. I really wasn't doing very much. To then go to having like 9:30 or 10:30 a.m. lecture, which isn't that early, I know, for a lot of schools, but for me, that's very early. Having lectures in like physics at like 10:30 in the morning, that was a huge shift for me. And then on top of that, having to be really responsible for my own like mental health and my physical well-being and eating healthy and doing all the things that my family was really doing for me when I was at home, to balancing a much more rigorous course and all of that. I think I expected moving to college to not really be that bad because I'm relatively close compared to a lot of my friends, but I think it was a lot harder than I expected. I don't think it's impossible. I think my first experience and my high school experience gave me a lot of like good preparation to be successful, and I'm really happy that I did well for a semester and everything. But I think it was definitely hard.
So for me, I really thought that that transitioning period would have been a lot worse. Not knowing how to cook, as well as trying to figure out, your dinner situation, trying to make new friends, everything like that. Like not knowing how your course load is going to be, seemed like it was going to be really difficult at first. But honestly, that transitioning period was not too bad. I feel like I was quickly able to adjust, and it worked out pretty well. And then in terms of kind of like, I guess like, yeah, I guess like just the in-person and virtual situation. When I was virtual, it was definitely not as exciting. I felt like I didn't learn as much in my courses, but being in person is definitely a lot more exciting. Just having your professor there, if you need to ask questions after class, or just making new friends in person, is just a lot better.
I relate pretty hard to the real life skills, like not knowing how to cook. But I think one of the things I was lucky about was I got to since I'm a sophomore now, I got to transition from high school to college. It stayed virtual for me. So living on your own, that part, I was able to handle separately from this year going back to in-person learning. So I kind of, opposed to Annika and Ayush, I was able to kind of take that 1 year at a time, opposed to having to go through those things at the same time. But depending on your high school experience and just life experience, you're going to handle those challenges differently. So it's not easy for me to say how one is harder than the other. It's just how you think about going into it and how you're able to take care of it.
Okay, so for our last question before we wrap up, this is a very, very fun one. Now that you're out of first, what does gracious professionalism mean to ya? Bet you didn't expect that, huh? There's a twist for you.
That like was such whiplash to like a judging room, and like they're like, can you each tell me what like GP means to you in the whole circle? And so like, okay, wow, that was whiplash. Regardless, I think now it means being a good roommate in a lot of ways. I think that's I think one of the hardest things about college, recognizing that you're sharing a space with another person. This is a very like niche example, I think. But I think a lot of college, I think, is about realizing that you're sharing a bathroom with like 7 to 10, maybe more other people. You're living in a shared space. You're trying to both uplift others while not letting, trying to care for others interfere with how you care for yourself. And I think a lot of it is about how can you be the best roommate, friend, support structure, and everything for your peers while not compromising the care that you have to give to yourself.
Yeah, so this sort of applies in two ways to my life. The first is just, throughout college and as you enter the workforce, you're always going to be working with other people. So making sure that you interact with those people graciously, professionally, kindly, being a supportive team member. And then also as someone who's involved in physics, physics is, a collaborative effort in terms of all the work that all these different groups all over the world are doing. And there's that aspect of how do I share my work, share my research collaboratively with everyone else in a way that's gracious, in a way that is, polite and supportive.
So back when I was in first, I would have said beating a team when they're at their best. But I think now in college, a lot of the collaborative work that I do, I think that there are a lot of people that come from different backgrounds and knowledge, and just being respectful to them because you never really know what they're going through.
I think, the concept of gracious professionalism it directly translates to all sorts of environments. One thing in ROTC is they tell you to be a good wingman. Even though you're competing for jobs, you're competing for scholarships, you help each other kind of become better people, better leaders. You want to really, be a good friend, pick each other up when you're down. And I think that translates to all aspects of your life. And so you want to retain kind of the experience you're picking up through first.
Okay, so thank you so much, Anika, Lena, Ayush, and Sarthak for presenting today at our roundtable discussion. I know I've certainly learned so much, and I'm sure the audience has too. And this was such an interesting experience. Now, guys, I just want to thank you for leading the way to make Wizards a great team and place to be in the first place. I know I'm on the team, and it's a great place because you guys made it this way. So thank you guys so much. And just for some information for you guys, the audience, our links are in the description for our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our website. So please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get some good information and to definitely look at our social media. You can email us with questions. And in addition, make sure to stay tuned for this Saturday, where we get an interesting presentation from Dr. April Erickson from the National Society of Black Engineers. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.